Hey everyone, happy Halloween and welcome to Movie Marathon's HQ, where we do movie marathons connected to new releases and where we enjoy and review some of our favorite movies. This video is part of the Avengers Doomsday Movie Marathon, where we are watching one movie per week as we prepare for the release of Avengers Doomsday in December 2026. Today we are discussing Werewolf by Night, released in 2022 and directed by composer Michael Giacchino. This was Marvel Studios' first direct-to-streaming movie, which they called a Marvel Studios special presentation. Overall, I like this movie more and more every time I watch it. I think it's a lot of fun, and it's fresh, and it's new, and it explores a different corner of the MCU that we had never seen before. I liked it when it came out, but I found myself growing to like it more and more as time goes on, and there are many times throughout the whole year that I think to myself, I want to watch Werewolf by Night again. So I do highly recommend it. This movie is out of order in the timeline. So I took it out of chronological order for the MCU and expanded MCU, and I took it out of order for the release date of the MCU and expanded MCU. I just wanted to watch it on Halloween. So since Werewolf by Night is so far completely self-contained, I took it out of order so I could watch it in October as part of the Avengers Doomsday Movie Marathon. Spoilers ahead as we discuss some of the positives and negatives. For positives, I have the aesthetic, the genre, and the world building. And for negatives, I have the lack of character development and the pacing. So the first positive that I'll mention is the aesthetic. So in developing this movie, they decided to make it black and white, which is just fun. That's probably easy to do nowadays, but that was a decision that they made to keep it black and white. And it paid homage to the monster movies, mostly by Universal in the 1930s and 40s. And so even in the film, they add the cigarette burns, which, as we know from Fight Club, is when the reels of film were spliced together. So they've added those in here for the aesthetic. And then some of the sound design is intentionally old-fashioned sounding, so it sounds kind of creaky, like from a record player. The score by Michael Giacchino is pretty fun, and it all just fits the aesthetic and the conventions. So I like that they made it in black and white. There is a version on Disney Plus of Werewolf by Night in color. I did watch that too. I think the black and white is better. There are a few things I noticed in the color version, like the medallions that they wear around their neck are a little bit easier to see in the color version. But then throughout the rest of it, the color kind of takes away from it. It just is kind of bland. But the black and white looks really good. So that's certainly how I'd recommend watching Werewolf by Night. The next positive is the genre. I confess I have seen barely any of the classic monster movies. I know I should, but I just haven't, and I have not been that interested. But watching Werewolf by Night, it makes me want to go back and watch those, which I think is a big win. It really pays homage to those movies throughout this whole story of Werewolf by Night. Some of the classic motifs and tropes and elements of those horror movies is pretty fun. This is not really horror. I mean, it is, but it's not scary or anything. It's just kind of a fun little corner to explore. One thing I do really like, though, is in those classic movies, they didn't have the budget for a big transformation scene where the main character turns into a monster. And so often that happened off screen in those classic movies. Here in Werewolf by Night, of course, they would have the technology and the costumes and stuff to make it look realistic if they did the transformation on screen, but they choose not to. There's a scene where Jack Russell, played by Gael Garcia Bernal, our main character, is transforming into the werewolf, but rather than show him directly, they show Elsa Bloodstone, played by Laura Connolly, and he tells her don't break eye contact, so she's looking directly into the camera, reacting as Jack turns into the werewolf. And then they have some light tricks where you see the shadow on the wall, and it's like a classic monster movie transformation that they chose to keep in there in keeping with the genre. So I think it's really fun. And I just think it's a great little way to differentiate this movie from the rest of the MCU. So that's a positive for me. The next positive to mention is not a very strong positive, but it is a slight positive overall, and that's the world building. they start to build a world and introduce us as the audience to this world where monsters have always existed, and there's been many monster hunters throughout the years. We meet Jack Russell, and he's one of the monster hunters, and he's got the highest kill count, but all these other monster hunters have pretty respectable kill counts themselves. So if you add that up, that's I think they said it's almost 200 monsters that they've all killed. So in the world of the MCU, there's stuff going on that we've never seen before. So I do like that that's introduced. It just leaves a lot to be desired because they don't go much into it. It's just kind of thrown out there, and maybe it will be picked up in other things, but it will be cool to explore that more. They also introduced the Bloodstone, which from the comics is some kind of a magical relic, and in this they just say it grants long life and power and longevity and all these kind of things. So they don't do much with it other than Elsa ends up with it at the end. So it's a soft positive, but I do like the world building in Werewolf by Night. Now for negatives, I'll just mention the lack of character development. This is a very short movie, which is good. It doesn't overextend its welcome. But Jack Russell does not get much character development. Elsa Bloodstone does get some. We kind of hear that she's estranged from her father, and then she kind of ran away from her family's legacy, but here she is coming full circle and coming back to accept it. But that's it. I don't know why, I don't know how, I don't know really what's happened to her to this point. So the character development is pretty lacking. Maybe if these characters come back, we'll see more, but in their debut, I would hope that there's more character development and more reason to root for them in their first outing. So that's a negative. And the next negative is just the pacing. As I said before, it is a very short movie, which is not necessarily bad. I think any particular story should have the length that it needs to tell the story. So a short movie is not automatically worse than a long movie, and a long movie is not automatically better than a short movie. It depends on the story. But this one is very short, and the pace just feels weird, especially towards the end. It kind of just wraps up, and I feel every time I watch it, I feel like I'm surprised that it's ending already. So it's kind of because the plot is thin and very simple, and then it just kind of wraps up and you're done. So the pacing is a little bit weird in Werewolf by Night. Now, how might Werewolf by Night connect to Avengers Doomsday? So because of the black and white style, it does suggest that this movie takes place in the distant past. However, there's a scene where Elsa and Jack are in an area that has some grave markers, and the deaths on those grave markers are all in the 1900s, with the latest one being either 1966 or 1986. It's hard to tell whether the second last number is a 6 or 8 based on the angle of the shot. But regardless, that suggests that this movie takes place much closer to modern day, because you can't have a death on a grave marker unless the person has died, and that's already happened. So it does suggest that this is more contemporary than it seems. However, none of these actors or characters are confirmed for Avengers Doomsday, so there's no guarantee they'll be connected, and I don't know how they would bring a supernatural element to Doomsday, so I don't think it will connect. So that's my review of Werewolf by Night. What did you think of this movie, and how do you think it might connect to Avengers Doomsday? Make sure to let me know in a comment below. Follow Movie Marathons on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and also on Letterboxd, where you can see all 5 versions of the Avengers Doomsday Movie Marathon. The next movie to watch in this marathon is X-Men Apocalypse. See you at the movies.